Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. It is TFT, and we finally went and bit that big bullet. We're doing 9/11, the big daddy of conspiracies. I don't know if they get much bigger than this one. And we're going to lay into this today. I have a feeling today is going to be more of a primer than anything to set up for future shows because there's so much to talk about. There's no way we can get it done in one show anyway. But we're certainly going to do our best to kind of cover the general idea. And it's been interesting to actually talk about it now because here we are 18 years later, and it has not gone away, and many would say it should never go away. And we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about it. But of course, welcome to the show. To keep in mind that we have all our links down below. Please go check them out. We want you guys to be part of our FanSpeak page on Facebook if you're not already. And of course, if you want to be on any of the FanSpeak shows, including Drawn and Quarter Ultimate Edition, just hit my Twitter up and we'll get you through that process. But thank you all for being here. And let me come over and say hello to my panelist, the one who has dared to be here. What's up, model?
Hey, how you doing, Chester?
I'm doing well, dude.
Absolutely. I love this subject, definitely.
I think it's a good, interesting subject as well. But it's kind of like that flat Earth, man. When we would talk about flat Earth, we upset some folks,
Yeah, this will get your channel flagged probably. You'll get the
probably.
the nice Encyclopedia Britannica article that lets people know what really happened on 9/11.
Oh no, we had that on a couple of our shows. I wonder if it did show up on our thing. I can't see it on my side, guys, but let me know if when you open up the YouTube, does it have a Wikipedia link or, as he said, Britannica link showing you the truth of 9/11? Because they like to do that stuff. The algorithm is awake and alive for sure. Let me know if you guys can see that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, who cares, really? I mean, it's just a conversation about something that happened, and 9/11 is interesting because a lot of people talk about the towers. Of course, Building 7 is the big one that people like to talk about, but a lot of people also forget that the Pentagon was also hit. And there was another one who crashed because they say that the passengers were heroic and fought against them, and they crashed the plane, right? So it wasn't just the two planes that went into the twin towers. But and it's kind of important too, with the Pentagon in particular, because if the Pentagon wasn't part of that, you got to keep this in mind because this actually lays into the conspiracy theory. If the Pentagon was not part of the whole attack, then it has a completely different feel to it, right? It's a civilian terrorist attack, but once the Pentagon is involved, now all of a sudden it's a military operation. It changes
Sure.
the complexity of the thing amazingly, and this is something that cannot be unemphasized here. Probably the most important crash altogether is the Pentagon, for at least what happened after. And of course, the conspiracy theories lead mainly into the fact that the whole thing was about what happened later, right? So Joe Maroney says a field in Pennsylvania. When the Pennsylvania plane crashed, I left work in Philly. 3 strikes.
Well, and there was a huge event that happened the day before 9/11. Do you remember what that was, Chester?
Oh, you talk about the military operation games that they were doing.
No, the Rumsfeld doing his press conference where he said that they had lost 2.3 trillion dollars and they could not account for it. It was just
Oh,
gone.
right. No, you're right. That did happen
That was
about
the
that time.
day before.
Yeah,
And
talk about misdirection.
well, and interestingly enough, that section of the Pentagon is where all the records were for those investigations for
Oh
the general
no.
accounting office. Oh yeah,
Convenience. Rumsfeld is also the guy who was involved with the whole things landing on the moon with Nixon, right? A
sure
lot of people
thing.
don't realize that, but he was, and he's actually gave an interview saying that if they couldn't keep the feed going with them landing on the moon, they actually had a theater produced version of it just to keep the people calm while they were doing it. So he literally admits in an interview that there is an actual Hollywood created version of the moon landing. I'm not joking at all, right?
Oh no, and
Yeah.
that video is available, readily available.
It is, and that's Rumsfeld. Yeah.
There's some older ones too that are closer to that time period,
Uh-huh.
where it's he's in the room, Kissinger's in there. You know, there's whole cast of characters that are always showing up.
Yeah.
But these guys are lifers. They're involved in
Oh
every
yeah,
single thing.
you're right. But we used to have a better cast of villains. I mean, these days they're kind of frumpy, dude. I feel a little disrespected. Why can't I have better villains in my government? I mean, really?
Yeah, when the Obama took over, it seemed like we got more clowns, you know, some kind of amateurs.
Yeah. I mean,
There were some real dark characters that were
oh,
involved all through the 80s and
freaking Kissinger? Are you kidding? We could do 1,000 shows on that dude. I mean, that's a corrupt son of a bitch right there, dude. Kissinger. And the things he's done. I mean, he falls in league with like freaking Churchill. I mean, that's that level, right?
well,
But
he's like a Soros level kind of
oh
guy.
yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely, dude. But these days we get AOC.
Yeah, it is
It's
weird.
sad.
Uh,
It's just sad.
Elizabeth Warren, you know,
Oh my God,
these
Pocahontas.
kind of clowns.
Yeah, it makes me feel I don't know. We of course we'd like some honesty in politics. That's never gonna happen. But I'd like to wish they were more dynamic and better at what they did. But oh well. But I really hope Elizabeth Warren wins that Democratic nomination because that would be freaking epic. I mean,
Sure.
Trump would just be dancing around, doing freaking war dances, red shirt dances. You know he will. He's going to have a freaking feather in his hair, doing oh, you know he will, because he does not
I
care.
don't think they can. I don't think they can probably sell Biden this time around. There's too much there.
Oh, Biden, yeah, no, he's. I mean, not to to cut the comedy for a second. I think it is a little bit sad that he's obviously got some, I don't know, dementia or Alzheimer's or something's kind of laying in on him. That's pretty quite obvious, and it's a little bit sad. I mean, the guy has served in politics what his whole life, right? And he's certainly done
Sure.
some scummy things, but he's done good things too. It's most politicians are like that. They do a lot of
Nice.
scummy stuff, but they do good things as well. It's kind of a
He's
balance.
given some nice back rubs and
Well, no, he's coming out of
test ladies perfume and
yeah, but I think he's coming out of what Pennsylvania, right? Isn't that where he's coming out of? I think
is
it's
he out of
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania?
I'm not sure, but I know the people there liked him before he got all hooked up with Obama. But anyway, we're way off subject here. So, as you guys know, every time we do this, I always go and give a bit of a primer. And today I'm doing the most subtle and overarching primer I could possibly do because of the subject matter. And what we're going to do is just kind of talk about it today, and with you guys, we want to have your opinion as well. Don't be shy. Get in there and chat away. And what we'll try to do is on the next show, we'll try to focus on one particular area that seems to be of the most interest. Okay, so let me come over and let me start doing that. And actually, I should, before I do that, I should probably share here so that model can see what I'm talking about, just in case. So let me do this, this, and this. There we go. All right. So let me jump over here and get into it. Now, of course, 9/11. We started off, of course, saying that mainly people talk about the Twin Towers, which was certainly the most shocking of it all. But there are other aspects of it that are actually more important. But of course, here we have a couple of pictures showing off what had happened on that day. And just as just to be completely upfront about it, I was actually in Hawaii at the time, and I was up late. It was quite late. I was just about to shut the TV off. I don't know what 2 o'clock in the morning, or I can't remember what it was, but it was pretty early. And I was getting ready just to shut the TV off and go to bed. And I was just checking the news, headline news or something like that, before I did. And they were sitting there talking about a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And I think we had had some kind of thing that happened before that. And it was just an accident. Some, Cessna had hit some building, and it was, within a month or so of that incident. So it was like, oh, not again. And the reporters were speaking about it in the same way as I just mentioned my thought, because they were like, "Oh, it's a horrible accident." But then while I'm listening to them talking about it, and they in the background behind them, they had it on the screen live, the second plane hit. And I saw the second plane hit, and it was a plane. At least that's what I was meant to see, I guess, if you want to go that way. But it was clearly a plane, came in, hit it, and the conversation changed immediately with the reporters. And it was a natural one, too. So no matter what conspiracy theory you want to get on, at least the reporters I were looking at were not involved in anything. For them, it was the real deal, and it was shocking. All right. So one of the things I kind of wanted to cover today is to try to remind us is the Pentagon, because the Pentagon, in my opinion, is the most important aspect of all of it. Because the Pentagon is where the military aspect comes into it and where it becomes much more serious, right? And of course, here's that famous picture, which supposedly shows the plane coming in. Of course, that's nowhere near the size of a plane. That looks more like a missile, actually. And this caption here says it's the only surviving frame of a cruise missile. Nose approaching Pentagon on 9/11, unretouched. Now we've seen other ones that show that they kind of had trouble getting their sizes right, because if you look at the destruction after the fact, as we can see, there was certainly a fire that spread later, but the actual damage itself was very localized. It was very focused, and of course, here's a thing showing that that plane hitting it would have made damage in a very different way. It would have damaged places that had no scratch at all. Um,
And also, Chester,
mhm,
that structure that has fallen in the
mhm,
center of that hole,
yeah,
that fell during the fire. Originally, all those windows were still across the top.
that's a good point.
So if you can find the early photos that show like immediately after it had happened,
Hmm.
you'll still see that facade of that building. All of that fell down after during the fire.
Well, and
So
even more important than that, there was no debris of any airplane anywhere.
correct, and there's they looked like there was some sheets of tin or something, or just sheet metal that was thrown out, but nowhere near what you can look up any photos of air crashes and see
Hmm.
the debris trail, which is massive,
Yeah, no,
massive.
absolutely, yeah, and of course, another aspect to take into account, the angle at which they show this happening, and of course, they were immediately the news was on showing trajectories and stuff like that. The problem is, in order for that plane to hit, it would have had to come in from the street, and well, then you would expect there would have been damaged poles, lights, and all kind of stuff on the street at that angle. Of course, nothing was touched. But this picture right here, it's obviously something coming in toward the Pentagon, caught on a camera, and it's nowhere near big. It's not an airplane size; it's a missile size. Now you can't say what it is because we don't see the fire from behind or whatever. I think it's quite an amazing picture anyway. But this is a big one for me. But moving away from that, if we come over to the actual Twin Towers themselves, and the general consensus over the years, it seems, is that the World Trade Centers were controlled demolitions. And we'll get into why that may be here in a moment. But let me just kind of look at this piece here. You have the believers say that we have bombs, seismic spikes, World Trade Center 7 collapse, which that's an important one. The fire cannot cause collapse, which that's not 100% true, although in the time frame it's troublesome. And of course, early flashes. The debunkers say, well, there was severe damage from the planes, which there would be. Steel frame failure, which heat can cause it to become soft and bend, of course. No bomb fragments, interesting. Fire assisted by structural failure, okay, and pictures and videos of planes, right. So these are the arguments that have been continuously going on. Now, there are people who get much deeper into this than just that. But as far as the World Trade Centers go, that seems to be kind of the general back and forth. And then, of course, the last thing I want to show, but before I come back over here to model, is this thing right here, which is kind of sits in with the time frame I just mentioned. You have this fire of the Windsor Building in Madrid. It was ablaze for 20 hours, and of course, the Windsor stood. And it's a similar structure to the World Trade Center. But the World Trade Center had fire, and it was down an hour and a half. And the time frame is really the problem for me, because people are saying that diesel fuel cannot be hot enough to melt steel. Well, no, it doesn't have to melt the steel, but it can certainly soften it, right? And this has been proven very clearly. But it's the time frame, though. An hour and a half, and if that was the fact, in an hour and a half at that specific area, sure, maybe it would cause some kind of failure, but it just means the top part of the building would have fall off, right? But the whole thing came down in such a beautiful, perfect way. And this was a problem as well because it came down so perfectly. I mean, it literally just fell into its own basement, which is what they do in demolition, which I think is one of the big things that gets people thinking that way. But anyway, this is just kind of an initial primer. It is ridiculous how many angles can be taken with a 9/11 thing. It's quite interesting. Another angle that you can take, strangely enough, if we come over here and we take a look at this, there have been many photographs and many information showing that the supposed people who were in those airplanes, the terrorists, have been seen alive. Now that's that what? That's a strange
Yeah,
thing.
I believe some of those men went to their own government and reported and said, "Hey, my passport's been stolen. That's not me. I'm alive."
Yeah. So this in itself is even confusion, right? These amazing terrorists, and of course Osama bin Laden, which I don't know. He's not a perfect human for sure, but he seems to be a bit of a patsy in this situation. But yeah. So uh, y- uh, now I know there's a couple things Model wants to show, but I'll wait until he prompts me for that. But that's my general layup for what we're talking about, Model. Where would you like to take it from there?
Well, first, I'll just like give you my basic opinion. I absolutely 100% think that those buildings were wired and they were just blown to smithereens.
Hmm.
And it would be pretty hard to change my opinion on that. And again, I think it's another instance of how media and information is used to just confuse people to the point of where they deny their own perception. They don't even trust what their eyes tell them and what
Hmm.
their own brain sees. And if you look at 9/11 in particular, it's a good example of so much information being thrown out there
Hmm.
that it almost gets to the point where that the information overload is used to confuse the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are a few smoking guns on that. I would say ultimately it all goes back to money. Almost everything always does.
Sure.
At some point, it goes back to money. But one thing that is verifiable that you can look up is that the code on those buildings was getting ready to come due, where
Oh yeah.
the city of New York was expecting them to completely clear those buildings of asbestos, and the cost of doing that, the estimates were more than what the buildings were worth.
Hmm.
So I think that that is really where it came down to is that, and I would say more than likely elements of Mossad and the CIA with full knowing of the United States government allowed those things to be wired and demolished.
Hmm. Well, and there's so much evidence for it being actually a demolition. Is why that is the persistent conspiracy theory,
Sure.
and it's more than just the asbestos. The structural integrity of the buildings were in question as well, right? There was a lot of money that was going to have to be spent on the World Trade Center to make it viable, to keep it viable. So that is a fair point, actually. And of course, it brings us to the conversation really comes down to it's either a brilliantly orchestrated and perfectly pulled off terrorist attack or it's a false flag. And that's really where it all comes down to. I don't really see a third option. It's either one or the other, right? As far as the demolition thing, there's plenty of people that heard explosions, firemen in the building, the fact that there was a ton of thermite boiling in the basement when the firemen came at the scene afterward. You have video evidence and photographic evidence of explosions popping out windows, and et cetera, et cetera. There's a huge amount of information that leans toward the demolition theory. And of course, that also leads us into Building 7, right?
Absolutely. There are daylight videos that show molten steel pouring out of those buildings before they even fell.
Yeah.
And even the media tried very hard to say that that was aluminum. But anyone can go and look up aluminum and see what molten aluminum looks like. It looks like melted lead. It's silver. So you will not see glowing red metal showering off a building. And also iron is a non-ferrous metal. So even impact will not create sparks with it. So that was, an iron or steel based
hmm You know,
reaction of some kind going on.
and I'm showing the video of Building 7 falling right now. And the interesting thing for me about it is that no one wants to talk about it, right? No one wants to talk about Building 7 because there's no reason it should have fallen. It wasn't struck by an airplane. There's no reason it should have fallen, especially because I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it fell before the other towers fell, right?
No, that's incorrect. It fell like 5 p.m. that
Oh, it
evening.
fell later. It fell later. Okay, okay, good, good,
The
good.
I believe it was around 8:45 when the first plane hit in the morning Eastern time. So and then those buildings came down, and then later that evening, Building 7 came down.
I see. So under the cover of smoke, I get it. Okay.
And play that again because that is a classic demo of a building.
It is. It's straight
Even
down.
the
Yeah.
center of the building drops in first, and then the rest of it comes down.
There's no fire. There's no nothing. And they haven't even bothered to try to. It's perfect demo actually. They haven't even tried to explain it by saying, "Well, it was on fire and in danger, and we had to bring it down." It was the most heroic demolition in history, or whatever. They could have went that route, but they didn't. They just don't talk about it, right? And of
Well,
course,
sure, because you can't wire a building for demo in an afternoon. It takes weeks. So they can't say, well, we just decided we had to go in there and take it down.
yeah, people are stupid though. They could have sold it, dude.
Well, they sold it with what they did, which is fairly shoddy. But well, I shouldn't say that because I think it's in the high 60s of people that think that that was an inside kind of deal. That it wasn't, 19 terrorists with box cutters, and that
Yeah,
there's
no,
way more.
it is interesting. 9/11 is one of those conspiracies that has more than 50% of people believe that something weird was going on. And because most conspiracies don't get that high, this one does. And of course, for a long time, we all remember, those of us who are old enough to remember, how hard they were trying to debunk all those conspiracy theories that came out in the first years. And they just push them back so hard. And is there? And also, I do believe with Building 7 there, that was also the one that had the reporter reporting the Building 7 had fallen down before it fell, right?
Correct. Oh, that
Yeah,
would have been on a BBC report
yeah. So
where she says the Solomon building fell and it's in the background while she's reporting.
right. So I mean, obviously, she had been given a script, and she wanted to.
Probably the time
Yeah,
difference, they pulled the
yeah.
trigger too soon.
Probably, yeah. And Damnation says the 9/11 was used to destabilize the Middle East. Yeah, sure it was. It was
Well, and
used
on
to,
on top of that, more so than that, I think that is a defining time in American culture when you can really see things shift
oh
as
yeah,
far as how regulations came in, how you started to see a lot of the political correctness, the censorship, the tech companies trying to control. Because if a lot of people were still young, but I was definitely old enough to be very interested in what's going on. And I remember at that time that these videos were getting taken down off the internet.
hmm
People would load them to places, they'd get deleted. I mean, there was a huge effort to get that stuff taken down.
hmm And this there absolutely was, and there's a lot of information. The FBI went and collected any kind of cell phone that had anything on it, saying it was for national security or what have you, and those phones have never been returned, by the way.
Hmm. No.
And Of course, they were just trying to cover up evidence. And this is also, if you guys haven't noticed, we do a lot of theories here. Of course, it is TFT, and I take devil's advocate on pretty much everything because it's kind of falls on me to do that. But in this case, I think something fishy happened. I wouldn't say that I'm a 100% on every of all the conspiracies, but I feel something very very strange happened, and I hope one day we'll have some kind of answers. And you never know. We might eventually, maybe our grandchildren will know. But you talk about the destabilizing of the Middle East. You got to keep in mind here, and I got a question for you, model. Actually, you think that since Ronald Reagan, we have had Democrats and a Republican president. Well, do keep in mind that George W. Bush, who was in charge during this time and was a hero for a short moment, he's not an actual Republican. You know that, right? He's a rhino.
Sure.
100%, right? And so
Absolutely.
what we've had since Papa Bush screwed it up with his 1,000 frickin' lights, and we've had nothing but Democrats running the country, right? And now we have Trump up in here, and Trump, of course, the reason why they hate him so much and attack him so much is because he's messing with their money, is what he's doing. Right, it's particularly all this nonsense they've been doing over in China. So this is why they're going at him. But here's the thing, model. You know how these governmental people think. Do you think Trump is truly something out of left field that they weren't expecting, or is he himself a false flag?
Uh, from what I've seen from him, um, I don't think he's fulfilling anything of what he promised. Um, I'm not that impressed, to be
N-
honest.
Not talking about
He's
impressed. I'm saying, is he legitimately something that they weren't expecting, or
I
is
do
he
think so, yeah, but I don't think that he's not rogue, that, they can't control him.
so he's not rogue? So you think he's part of the narrative?
Maybe not all the way. I don't think they wanted him in there. I do think that he kind of came out and just kind of took that over by himself, and he wasn't the one they wanted in there. Hillary was supposed to get in there.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
absolutely believe that.
hmm.
But it was just too much of a swing for them to steal it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because I can't really answer that question. My mind says that he's just part of the system, as any other one would. But if it is, it's one of the most well orchestrated, cover-ups or just illusions that they probably ever done. As far if Trump is truly just part of the part of the ongoing narrative. But the reason I mention that is because. When you talk about the destabilization in the Middle East, of course, 9/11 led us into Iraq, which they couldn't get into Iraq initially. Afghanistan was easy enough, but Iraq was different because we didn't have any direct evidence connecting them. But they really wanted to get into Iraq for some reason. Now, some people say, well, that's just because Baby Bush wanted to avenge his father or continue what his father was doing. But it seems a bit simplistic. I don't know, maybe. But if we look later, what happened with Obama, the destabilization continued hardcore, right? Obama did
Yeah,
a
I think
lot to tear up the Middle East.
I think 9/11 was supposed to kind of set the stage for 30 years over there,
Uh-huh.
and for everyone to really load their pockets full of money.
Yeah, and the thing with it is which is why I asked the question about Trump, because one of the things that Trump has done successfully, other than having a pretty strong economy, is he's kind of shut down everything that was going on in the Middle East. He just shut it down, right?
Yeah, and that's where I think he's gone kind of off the reservation with these people. They were okay with it for until he started to do that, but that is really affecting their money. Now, the one thing that I don't absolutely understand completely is why Saudi Arabia was, first of all, why they were blamed for it. Now, there is a very close relationship with Israel and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Israel basically runs Saudi Arabia. They've, the families they're all involved. The money is all going back and forth.
Mhm.
So maybe using that as the country to blame, it was easier because they had a foot in the door. They could control what information got out, what
Mhm.
evidence was found, and things like that. They could control the people that they wanted to put the blame on, and that's probably why, rather than some rogue nation who could set up press conferences and put out evidence and say, did you ever hear Saudi Arabia really come up and like defend themselves and say, no, this wasn't us.
No, they didn't.
They just kind of ate it.
Yeah, they did. And of course, in the end, it wasn't the royal family or the government. It was rogue elements of their community. But as far as the main story. But it is interesting to me that you mentioned that because these, for a long time, Iran has been the troublemaker, and they've been on
Hmm.
Iran forever. And the thing is, Iran doesn't really do much at all. Actually, you
No,
might
for
not.
40 years they've been the boogeyman
Yeah, yeah, right.
with the Ayatollahs. You remember all that in the
Of
80s, how
course, I do.
hard they pushed the Ayatollah Khomeini, and
Mhm.
that was ridiculous.
Yeah, no, and the narrative has continued, and of course the funny thing is that if you look at a lot of the actual difficulties and troubles and the financing of stuff that comes out of the Middle East, a lot of it is coming from Saudi Arabia,
Hmm.
and they are actually kind of the big villain in many ways. But you mentioning their relationship with Israel, which you would think they wouldn't have one, but they do, a very serious one. And the narrative is quite interesting to me. Like we just had supposedly a bunch of Saudi Arabia oil refineries struck by missiles, and Iran did it, right? And it's like, well, where's your evidence that Iran did it? Oh, we have these missiles. Well, those are Western missiles. They ain't from Iran. They stole them. Well, where'd they get them from? Right? So I mean, it's just kind of an ongoing narrative, right? So it's for me, it's like we've been one of the things that's been going on in the back channels if you paid attention to the economic reports and not just the big flashy headlines. Saudi Arabia has been winding down their oil production quite a while because they're coming to the end of their oil fields. Now of course there's plenty of oil on the planet, but their oil fields are coming to an end, right? And
Yeah, we
one
we drain their milkshake.
we
I
did,
mean, we
baby.
we
Yeah.
drain them dry, and once they're dry, they're kind of in trouble.
Financially, yeah. I mean, for the maintenance of their country, and you do keep in mind something that's happened very recently with Saudi Arabia. Once again, that oil refinery attack seemed to kind of cover up the main story, from my point of view, which was they just made the oil companies controlled by those royal princes over in Saudi Arabia. They just made themselves public on the stock exchange.
Mhm.
hmm Trying to pull in some extra money before the thing's done, right? Is what they're doing, and they've been trying to do a lot of things to shift the economic aspects of Saudi Arabia to other things. This is an ongoing narrative that, unless you're paying attention to the economics, you wouldn't even understand, and therefore, it's been 18 years, but they would have certainly known exactly when their oil was going to run out, right? Or at
Mhm.
least have a really good understanding of when about when. So I'm just kind of wondering if there's more to it than simply let's get in the Middle East and destabilize the Middle East, because it seems a very simplistic answer. You know what I mean?
Well, you know that I'm actually a professional model builder. That is what I do. I build
Yeah.
models. It sounds weird, but that's exactly what I do. And one of the first jobs I ever had, um, back in the early '90s, right out of I actually took changed my college schedule and cut my schedule way back and went to work for a company that specialized in those huge architectural presentation models.
Oh yeah.
Now, we were, this is in, like I say, about 1992. We were doing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of models for these um, development projects in Saudi Arabia.
hmm
And you would not believe the the money that they were spending in 1992 on these huge complexes. And then we would build these models that were $250,000 tabletop model, and they had all these ornate stone tile patterns, and they were huge. So that there was a huge influx of money that came out in the 80s. And then if you watch the development of everything that's happened in Saudi Arabia going all the way through the 90s and how much money they were spending, and then something very significant came up with 9/11. And you don't hear about Saudi Arabia as much anymore. Um, but I think part of that has to do with that relationship with Israel. And my understanding is that really Israel calls the shots for what the Saudis do.
Well, that's the conspiracy theory anyway.
Right.
Yeah, and I've actually seen quite a bit of your model building. You are actually really, really good at it, and it's just amazing the stuff you put out. But that's kind of cool. I didn't know you worked for that kind of company, but it makes sense though. Those things need to get made, right?
Yeah, we did piping models for refineries, and the whole purpose of doing that was so that they could test their blueprints and make sure that pipes didn't run into each other or conduits didn't run into each other, where it would cost millions and millions and millions of dollars in the field to change.
Sure,
And it's just astonishing the amount of work that we did for these huge not and some commercial but some industrial. And why it was being done here in the States, I don't know. I'm guessing they probably used architects and engineers in New York and Atlanta and things like that. But these things were named after the princes, the Saudi Arabian princes. So
sure.
they were blowing through billions of dollars back in the early 90s.
Yeah, no, they certainly like to throw money around. And just as an aside, it doesn't mean nothing. But do keep in mind that Saudi Arabian prince, one of the princes, I think it's the big one that's supposed to be the new head of the caliphate. They keep trying to push that. But he built himself a big old boat, a yacht. I don't know if you guys know, but I'm really into boats. And one of the biggest boats in the world, right? But at the same time, he was building that boat, that yacht. There was another yacht being built by a UAE guy, another rich oil dude, Arab oil dude, and his is bigger. And for those people now that they use that, what does that mean? Well, for those people, it means quite a bit. These people will spend literally $1 billion on a boat, right, or more. Yeah, I just thought it was a little a side thing that might show that their money spending is kind of starting to get curtailed. You know what I mean? Because normally I don't think they would stand for having a UAE guy having a bigger boat than them. You know what I mean? No, no, no one's biting. All right, that's fine. Let's see here. Now we have Revit. I'm working in it right now. Howdy, all ready for some learning. This is of course Obi-Wan. Hello, hello. And are you still with me there, model? You're having some mic trouble, it sounds like. Well, while he tries to figure that out, let me come over and show that video, of course, of the towers coming down real quick, and hopefully a model will get his mic working. All right, here we go. So now, of course, we all remember when this happened. This is South Tower, I think. First one was coming down, and we all saw it live. I'd actually by this time I had woken my wife up, and she was out there in the living room watching it with me whilst we were in Hawaii. And yeah, oh, you're back now. I see. You were just getting coffee. Oh, I get it. Okay. Can you hear me now, model? Hmm. Seems to be some problem. I wonder if it's my
I
problem.
can I
Oh, you
can
can.
hear you.
Okay, there you go. But I do remember when these came down, and we all remember all the smoke and stuff. And for those of us who saw this live, I don't know if it's traumatic, but it was surreal, I think. Is really the feeling I probably had. And one of the interesting things that happened after this, when you had Giuliani, who did a great job with organizing things, and then Baby Bush coming up and standing on the rubble a couple of days later, doing his big speech. That was a moment for him. He was, he could do no wrong at that moment. And the thing for me that came out of 9/11 most was really disappointment. I'm not talking about the conspiracy here. I'm just talking about the disappointment of it because at that moment in time, the whole world was with America. We had their sympathies, we had their understandings, and I don't think everyone really understands how rare that is. Right? The Europeans
Well, and
all.
there was a surge in patriotism in this
Oh yeah.
country like you would not
Oh
believe.
yeah, I wore a flag pin for years, dude. For years after that. Even Obama, who we know he's not all about America, even he wore a pin, dude. Right? And but the thing with it that that really disappointed me was this. Because we had all that support, and like I said, the Europeans always look down their nose at us, and every country in the world wants to look down or have some negative thing about America. Now, you could say that's jealousy or whatever. Doesn't matter. It's nothing new. It's the same attitude they've had about, toward us before even World War II. We've always been the savage, barbarian idiots over there making a bunch of noise. That's who the Americans are to them, right? But we had everybody's sympathy. We could have done something great at that moment, but what do? We send in military and just attack stuff. It was a missed opportunity, a truly missed opportunity. We could have turned the other cheek at that moment, and we could have made solidarity with our allies, and we could have made a better world. Now, I understand that the politicians and such, that's not what they're all about. That's not what they want. They want to have this constant state of anger and worry and fear. I get it. I get it. But, the hopeful person in me saw an opportunity and it pissed me off that we didn't take it, you know?
No, we immediately went to and we went to Iraq, which wasn't even involved.
Right.
And nobody had a problem with it. I remember at the time, and like you said, it was shocking to watch that happen.
Yeah.
And for that week after, you just watched the news, watched it replay and replay. Uh, I remember specifically at the time, when it first happened, I was like, oh, those sons of bitches, just blow them up. But as I started to watch more, and I think that's kind of what happened with other parts in the world because over in Europe and you get out of America and the rates of people that think 9/11 was a complete bogus op is way higher than here in America.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know what the difference is. I mean, you're talking about differences in the electorate and stuff like that. But I in watching we all watched those videos play 100 times,
Hmm.
and I remember specifically thinking this just isn't right. There's something really really wrong here, especially watching that other building 7 come down. But even watching those buildings just turn into a pile of dust. It's like there's something, and now there's all you get into all kinds of directed energy weapons, nuclear weapons, all kinds of things like that. But I think it's just as simple as damn things were wired and just blown up.
Yeah, and there are videos that show an object hitting the building that's not a plane, and there's pictures of the plane that are close up showing that they're not actual airline planes, they're military planes, etc. There's tons of stuff. Like I said, there's too much for
Sure.
us to cover in one show. But and here comes down another one, the second one here. This is a great video to play actually because it brings back that memory. Let me read over here in the chat because we're getting some firsthand accounts of the experience here. Joe says, I was on the phone with someone in Brooklyn at the time. It was surreal when the second plane hit. Yeah, no, I know, and I can imagine that. And the funny thing about that is, Trump. People get on his case about all kind of things, and some of it is deserved, to be fair. But he was in New York at the time too, and he saw it play out just like all the other people living there, and it irked him, not only as an American but as a New Yorker. And so some of the most honest things you can see here come out of Trump's mouth when he's talking about 9/11, actually, and he strongly believes something went on. Right, he would say about that, for years before he ever decided to run for president. So he's you're in fine company, I guess, if you look at it like that. But uh, you know, uh, it's shocking to me because one of the other things he said that the Democrats really love to rail against is one of the things he really keyed in on is that there were many people around the world, including in New York itself, that were literally dancing in the streets when those towers came down, right? Dancing, happy for that death. Now in Palestine, I get it, but in New York, it's very weird. And the Democrats say there were no people, there were nobody doing that. I go, we know were. We have video of showing them doing it. We even have someone in our world, the comic book world, who proudly states that he was standing in the ashes that were coming down from the buildings and loving the fact that he was standing in the burned ashes of dead white people. Hmm. Right?
Hmm.
And then what does Marvel do? They take this jackass and they put him on Captain America. Talking about kicking you straight in the balls, right? Do not think at any moment that people over Marvel are not doing these things very, very deliberately. All right. But
Well, there
anyway,
were 5 Mossad agents that are on an Israeli TV show that you can go right now and look up and watch, where they were arrested by the FBI and they were held for I think 60 days.
uh-huh.
And they're referred to as the dancing Israelis because they were on standing on top of a van with a video camera dancing and filming the buildings come down.
Yeah.
Now, in that interview on that TV show, they specifically say they were there to document the event. So they had foreknowledge
Yeah.
of an event.
Yeah.
And there's no way to get around that. Now, going back to what you said about Trump, that was one of the main things that interested me about Trump getting in there. And the fact that he hasn't pulled the plug on this tells me that they either got him in control
Hmm.
or maybe he's holding that for a second term when he can go scorched earth. I don't know. But the fact that no one has been put in jail yet is that's very telling to me
It is.
of someone who is either in the system or really not that committed to doing anything about it.
Well, keep this in mind too. One thing I noticed with Trump, and I'm just replaying this. This is a perfect video to talk over, really. And Keep this in mind with Trump, though. If you remember the first day he went to the White House, and he went in for supposedly a short meeting with Obama that turned into what, hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. When he came out and he was sitting there talking with Obama, was his typical unemotional self. Trump was white as a sheet, dude. White
Well,
as a
I've
sheet.
always believed that the first thing that happens to a new president, he gets taken into a room, he gets sat down, and they tell him how things really are.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm positive of that. I have a very close, I have a family friend, or there's a friend of the family. He's an older man now, but he was in the Reagan administration, and some of the stuff that I've heard, of course you can't verify it,
Yeah.
but a lot of people I think don't really believe that there is for well multiple things. People don't believe that there is actually a group that owns the world. Say, oh, it's the world, it's our planet. Now it's a chunk of land, and somebody owns it,
Yeah.
and it's most likely the Rothschilds. Yeah, after you own a country, and then you own a continent, the next thing you pretty much want to do is you want to own the whole thing. And so at this time, there are there is a group that owns the world. You're just something living here. You're a commodity. You're a
Right.
worker.
Well, there are
But
five.
I think people have a really hard time understanding that there is real evil. There are horrible, horrible people, and they are in charge of a lot of things.
Yeah, they just made Charlie's Angels again. That's evil as hell,
Hmm.
dude. Yeah, but no, joking aside, there are five banks that basically control majority of all debt on the planet, and Rothschilds, of course, being directly affiliated with it. But whoever it may be, one thing to keep in mind, I can make the most simple concept laid out to you. Now, I'm sure many of you here own land or property, at least the house you have. I do. I got several little pieces around here. But the thing with it is, do you really own that land? Because
No,
this
you
is,
absolutely do not.
you do
Don't pay
not.
your property taxes. You'll find out
That's right.
how much
Yeah.
you own your
So
land.
you don't really own anything. You
You
are
don't own your
leasing it.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, because they put tax on top of everything that they wanted to control, right? And this is why you see people getting their land stripped away because they put the wrong color on their roof, or they didn't have the cleanest or coolest looking building on it, or whatever. These people who try to homestead, modern homesteading, which is I have no problem with that. They get come under a huge attack from these local boards. Now you can say, well, that's just pompous, the egotistic asses trying to control the aesthetics of their neighborhood. Is it, or is it more insidious than that? But
well, not only will Chester, not only will they do that, they will come with the barrel of a gun
oh
and
yeah,
kill you.
oh yeah, yeah.
So, it's not just like some control freaks.
Mhm.
This is what it is. That's the reality of it.
Oh yeah, and understand this that you think I'm talking about America? No, I'm not. I'm talking about the entire planet. There is no place on this planet that I know of that you actually don't have to pay property tax, right?
Correct.
So this is not a isolated thing. This is a worldwide thing. But let me catch up with the chat because there are a few interesting comments here. Eric Hawkins says, "Very surreal watching it live. I was watching when the second plane hit and spent way into the night watching the news channels. Yeah, we all did, dude." Joe says, "Synchronicity. The day it happened, I was on the way to work. Had just read Batman: No Man's Land. Ooh, and was thinking what I would do in a situation like that. Stock up on med supplies, batteries, etc." Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, of course, I'm kind of interested. This is a very good point, Joe, because I don't have the answer, but I am curious. Before 9/11 and after 9/11, the survivalist groups, the people who do the kind of survivalist stuff, was it a thing before 9/11, or did 9/11 cause that? That's interesting. I don't know. I don't know. Joe,
There were
continuing.
always militia groups. There were Civil Air Patrol and there were
Yeah,
private
yeah, but you
militia
know what I
groups
mean.
all over the country. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's people spending freaking, millions of dollars on bunkers and stuff still, dude.
Well, I think some of that started with Y2K too. People buying generators and the
Yeah,
doom and
yeah,
gloom has been going on for quite a while.
true. But I mean, the last time we had this kind of hysteria was during the Cuban Missile Crisis, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of Americans were investing in bunkers and water supplies and all kind of stuff like that. But it is interesting. I never thought about it before, but he kind of triggered my thought with that Batman reference there. Very nice. Got to work and then it hit. Went to Walmart, bought cases of water, and waited for the worst. Wow, wow. Now, of course, he's in Brooklyn, so it's a very different thing from him for him because the rest of us were just kind of watching it from afar. I never had fear of anything coming to me, but he was in the middle of it. So yeah, that's interesting. Not us Aussies. We always sucked up to you. Obi-Wan says. Is that really true? Now, come on, come on. I've met
Not, I
a
would
lot
say,
of
not that much anymore.
Oh, they never have, dude. I've met a lot of Australians in my life, and they're always got something negative. They're quicker to be negative about us than Canadians are or Brits. The Aussies are quick to say something negative about an American, real quick, and that's all cool. It's usually done tongue in cheek. I get it, but we Americans get this crap all the time. And the funny thing about it is that because most people in the world they don't really understand Americans at all. Okay, just like with everybody else, we separate you from your government, right? Although a lot of people in the world don't separate us from ours. But here's the thing: we are David. We've always seen ourselves as David. Even though you think we're Goliath, and we may well be Goliath, we've always seen ourselves as the underdog. That's what the American spirit and the American mentality is. We are David, right? And people just don't get that model.
Well, and our media and pop culture paints a very different picture of what the reality is.
Right.
If you just sat down and watched TV, if you were from, an alien from another planet and you sat down and started watching our TV, you'd think everything was just insane. And it's not representative. It's not a true representation.
No, it's not at all. Joe continues by saying, assuming it was truly a terrorist attack, no other cheek. Well, I was just
It
stating at the
was a
moment
terrorist attack.
it
It's just
was,
who did
yeah,
it.
yeah. But the other cheek comment made by me was, I don't, I understand the need for revenge, and I get all of that, but it was how I felt at the moment, and I still do, because I just saw no, and I understand if this is an actual conspiracy and there was actual stuff going on, then obviously this doesn't matter because they had their intent is what they got and what they produced. But for me, as just a simple American watching it, I felt like we had an opportunity to lock in to the sentiment of the world who was truly behind us for the first time in what, maybe forever, dude. And we squandered it. I will never forgive Bush for that. I will never do it because
I
he
do
squandered an
recall
opportunity.
I do recall France being very critical of us immediately after.
Well, they're fucking
And
French,
and
dude.
France
Ding
France took
ding.
a lot of heck over that, for freedom fries and stuff like that.
Right, right. But I mean, they're the French, dude. They always have to be obstinate. It's in their freaking DNA. That's a completely different conversation. Let me see here. Joe said, if anything, the worst response was to turn on our own citizens with the Patriot Act and such. Now that's a conversation, and we could do a whole show on that thing because that
Sure,
was
you
a
can get into
debacle.
that. You can get into the documents that were in the SEC investigation that were in Building 7. You can ask where the gold is that was in the
Right,
basement of the World Trade Center.
right, right.
There's piles and piles of questions that have to do with the PNAC
Yeah,
documents,
yeah,
which are
and
damning.
yeah, and this is a great point from Curious 2A as well. Never forget that jet fuel doesn't melt passports. Yeah, remember how many passports they pulled out of the wreckage, right? Very good point,
Yeah, and
dude.
that's always like people talk about softening the building, but really there you can measure and they know how hot it's basically kerosene, JP4 jet fuel. It's kerosene. And they know how hot it can burn. They say, "Oh, it's all the office." Well, office materials and paper doesn't burn hotter than kerosene.
No, no, no.
So when people are watching these videos, what I would encourage you to do when you watch that video and see that building turning into a cloud, basically,
Hmm.
think about the physics involved in that. So I'll ask you two things, Chester.
Hmm.
If you had the World Trade Center sitting there and you took another World Trade Center building and held it above and dropped it on the World Trade Center, do you think that bottom building would turn into a cloud of dust?
No, I think they'd probably get mangled amongst each other.
Now, here's another one. If you were able to suspend a jetliner stationary in the air and now take a World Trade Center building and run it at that plane at 500 miles an hour, do you think that building would come apart or would it just obliterate that airplane?
Oh, it vaporized the plane for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, it would barely even do anything to the building.
yeah. Oh, I know.
And
It's all
there's
suspect, dude.
there's
Yeah.
there's no difference in the plane running into the building or the building running into the plane.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is because having a plane being driven into the towers by a terrorist, in and of itself is amazingly shocking, right? I mean,
Sure.
that's well enough, but the fact that the buildings came down as well, that just adds layer upon layer. And of course, this was the intent, probably. Let me keep with this. I want to catch up with the chat if I can. Let's see. Those people dancing are why I say F the other cheek. Yeah, I get it, Joe. But I just really felt we missed a golden opportunity because you think things are better now than they were? Well, America is laughed at by everybody, dude. Now, I understand there's jealousy involved in it. I get it, but it's worse now than it was when I was a kid, right? Preppers became big after Y2K. Well, there you go. Thank you. No, I'm in Philly, he says. Was on the phone with someone in Brooklyn. Oh, okay, okay, okay. Sorry about that. But Brooklyn, New York, as an island, would be really hit by a disaster, just like the Gotham and New No Man's Land. I think so. I lived in Brooklyn and Manhattan for quite a while, and I certainly know the state, the city quite well. And dude, if there was an actual thing that shut the lights and power down for, like, say, a week or some kind of disaster that locked off New York, it would be absolutely, road warrior, dude. It would have to absolutely be.
It
And
would
you
take about 72 hours before you had people killing each other in the streets, and
easy.
then you'd start having cannibalism in a week.
Well, if we went that drastic, but
Yeah.
possibly. But yeah, no, that New York is a kind of ticking time bomb. It always has been. Uh,
All the
uh,
major cities are time bombs.
Yeah, yeah. Childhood animated says modern day gold heist. Yeah, it's a fair point. Fair point. Joe says Bush is the one who called Islam a religion of peace. Ugh. Well, Obama insisted that it was as well. Eric, of all the conspiracies, this is the one I will watch hours of video on and wonder what the truth is. Fake moon landings. No, you are crazy. 9/11 planned. Maybe. Right? Right. Yeah. Uh,
It's better than a gold heist though, because not only did they get everything of value out of those buildings, they also got the futures on the stock market. They
mhm.
raked it in there, and then at the end of it, they got what, $9 billion in insurance?
Oh, we talk about the owners of the World Trade Center. Well,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
you
yeah,
talk about a perfect crime. I mean, they
yeah,
raked in billions and billions of dollars.
mm,
And then also all the people involved and the families, like the Chertovs that started doing all the back scanners for the airports.
yep, yep,
And I
yeah.
mean, like most things, you can really start following the money. And
Oh, sure,
the
sure.
Bushes are knee deep in that. The
Oh, they always
Bushes
have
were
been, dude.
all over that thing. What was it? One of the Marvin Bush was head of security or something. I
Yeah.
mean, it's crazy.
Well, I mean, the Bushes have always been on this side of stuff. You go back to Preston Bush during World War II. He was a major funder of the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler. People don't like to talk about that, I guess. But the Bushes have
And
always been where the money is. That's why they're
well,
billionaires,
all the
dude.
major banks were
No, sure.
funding the
Yeah.
Nazis. Yeah.
Well,
So
and I think a lot of Americans don't really understand that before America was, in essence, forced into that war, most Americans kind of sided with Germany anyway. Because they felt the Treaty of Versailles was way too draconic in its way, and the German people were suffering. And although they tell you that the Germans went into this place or that place, they went and took Austria. No, they didn't. Austria asked them to come in. All these little places in the beginning they went to were places that they were taken away from them after World War One, and the people were being treated horribly by the Germans. Were being treated horribly by the governments that now controlled that land, and it was more of a coming back home type of thing, which is why the whole fatherland became a big pushing point for the Nazis, right? But
well, that's another three-part show, World War II, because the
yeah,
history was completely rewritten on World
it
War II.
was. It was. And I'm not sitting here saying Adolf was a good guy because he's a warlord. He did plenty of bad things, and we know that he was being horribly medicated, and he got worse and worse and worse as time went on. But so I'm not taking anything away from Adolf. I'm just saying that at least let's be honest with it about it. They still don't even want to talk about the fact that the Polish were shooting at German planes well before the Germans ever decided to strike back, right? Anyway, we're way off subject.
Yeah.
Preston Bush did that, but I mean, the Bushes and many of these people have been involved for a long time in this kind of stuff. Gold isn't used as a money currency; it also used for electrical currents. Yeah, no, but Yeah, okay. That's another conversation. The Hyksos Kings did it. Thank you, Nick. Uh,
Well,
Eric says,
on the Bush thing too, the George Bush Sr., he was head of the CIA
yeah,
when Kennedy
yeah,
was assassinated. And 9/11 is one of those events that I think really one of the big changes that occurred in the country was when they realized that they could kill a president underneath everyone's nose on TV and get away with it. So that was a defining moment for America. I think 9/11 is another one
mm,
where they were able to pull off something on a massive scale live on TV and get away with it. And in some regards, I kind of think this thing going on right now with Trump is another little test, because if they can pull a president, they know that they can pull any president out of office at any time they want. That's a big move.
yeah, no, and it's so blatant that they don't care that you can see how blatant it is.
Right.
But one thing I do have to say about this subject, I guess it's been long enough because you guys remember when we would talk about flat Earth, which just having some fun talking about it, right? This is more of a serious conversation. But in the flat Earth, we had two seemingly governmental type people show up during our little teeny stream and start throwing flack around. You remember? We had
Hmm.
three guys actually showed up just causing trouble, right? We don't know who they are, out of nowhere,
Very aggressive
very
and
aggressive, right?
very venomous.
Right. But here we're talking about 9/11 and no one's coming to give us any flack. So I guess it's been long enough.
Well, and I
So
also think that they're just not worried about it anymore. For all intents and purposes, they got away with it.
pretty much, yeah. Yeah. Let's see here. Eric says, might have been my ex-wife. She burnt two houses down on purpose, and the insurance company never smart enough to figure out she moved everything out first both times. Well, that sounds like an interesting story, Eric. I'm sorry for you. I'm glad you're not dead or anything. Star Storyteller says, "Oh, now we are cooking." Oh, she's liking it. All right. Childhood Animated says, "What did the Anunnaki need gold for if it wasn't for currency?" Well, that's another conversation. But of course, in their stories, the Sumerian stories or just the Mesopotamian ones, they are very clear what they wanted it for. They were having some kind of problem on their planet, and they needed the gold because they wanted to suspend it in the atmosphere to create a reflectiveness of the heat so that they could keep their planetary temperature livable. Now, it's very specific, right? And it's interesting to me too because this is supposedly stories from antediluvian time, right? These are copies of stories for antediluvian. At least that's what the translations in the libraries from 5,000 years ago say. And it's interesting that they would have an understanding that gold could be used in that way because scientifically it can. So, but that's a different conversation. The Germans were screwed over in that treaty. Yes, they were. Yes, especially seeing as the fact that, as with World War II, World War One was started by the frickin' British. Let's see here. Curious to a. I heard the Panzer tanks had Ford engines, but I can't find proof of it. I have never heard that. Nick C
No,
says
they had Porsche and Benz engines.
Well, yeah, you would think so. They were amazing machines, actually. Nick C says, this has nothing to do with Pokemon Sword and Shield. No, it doesn't. I do apologize. Joe says, has anyone tied 9/11 to the Trade Center bombing in 93? I think it was 93. Well, that's a good point. Let me come back to that 1 second because I'm almost at the bottom. They sound like nice guys. Joe says, killing a president on TV and getting away with it. Talk about your Overton window. Ooh, interesting. Nick says, George! And Model here says, do you guys see how easy you can get Chester? What? Knock it off. Let's come back to the 9/11 and, of course, the Trade Center in 93. Now, yeah, there's a fair point. There was an attack, a failed attack on the World Trade Center at some point. I don't know if it was 93, but it was certainly before
It was
2001.
93,
And
and it was truck bombs.
yes, and they're seemingly connected it to Osama eventually.
Well, they actually did put someone away for that. Another person, I forget what his name was, but that first one was done with conventional explosives in vehicles in the basement. Now, I do wonder because that's going back to 93. And I do wonder if that was when they took a shot at it
Mhm.
first, and it really did not do a lot of damage. In fact, they just kept the buildings open and they refurbished what happened in the basement.
Right.
But
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that point to that not being just some truck bomber either. It wasn't
Well,
just.
we also have the I think it was CIA a report, or maybe NSA, but there was a report that came out, and it was it had listing of things that could be used for false flags, or things that to look out for. And one of the things on that list was taking down skyscrapers with
Mm.
airplanes, right? And that was coming. I do recall that was coming out around the same time as the first attack on the World Trade Center.
Oh, and you had Oklahoma City as well.
Yep. Yeah. And even there, now you had a major explosion on a much smaller building and then it didn't even drop that building. It tore a chunk out of the center of that sucker. It didn't drop it though, right? So
Absolutely.
anyway, George has popped in here. Hello, George.
Greetings.
And again, that was a fertilizer bomb, and a lot of experts have said that there's a fertilizer bomb in a truck would not create the pressures needed for that kind of an explosion. It would make a big boom.
Yeah, and that's another
So,
conspiracy theory. Yeah.
so what you're saying is it was a shitty bomb.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
if you put a fertilizer bomb in the back of a truck, one of the things that, if you pour black powder on the sidewalk, you can light it and it'll just sit there and spark. But if you put it inside a rigid container that gives it some containment on the gases, that's when you get an explosion. So
Sure.
it's the same way with a fertilizer bomb. If you fill up 55-gallon drums full of fertilizer and diesel fuel, yeah, it'll probably go off, but it's going to be a fire bomb.
Yeah, it is
You're
a
not
firebomb. Yeah.
A truck cannot contain it. It doesn't have that strength in the container of a truck to
Well,
create that pressure.
we've seen many of them in the Middle East. Actually, we've actually seen the bombs, and mainly they are
Right.
big fireballs. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You
And
know.
they do pack some of those things into pipes and things like that. And that's how you get these really destructive explosions.
Sure. You need
And then
pressure. Yeah.
and we're also using C4 and stuff like that in a lot of those,
Mhm.
or Semtech,
Well,
more than
the
likely.
interesting thing about Terry McNichol, since we're talking about Oklahoma, interesting thing. At first, they were tying him to militia groups and all kind of stuff like that. But did you notice that in the end, what they tied him to was being a sovereign citizen?
Hmm.
It's interesting, and it was way after the fact. Why they thought it necessary to put that tag on him, I wonder. You know,
Well,
because
if you remember at that time, there was a huge push especially going into the Clinton administration, of really demonizing militia groups. They went really hard on the militia groups.
yeah, they did. Yeah,
But
they
they had
did.
a PR nightmare that happened with Waco and Ruby Ridge and all those things like that. So they had to put some danger into these groups to justify why they were going after them so seriously. Because really, most of these people, they would have been fine just being left alone.
Yeah, but see, the sovereign citizens are just a kind of bunch of goofballs, right? They're not a threat to, hardly even a threat to themselves.
No.
They just thought it was a strange little thing that they tagged that on top of them at the end. But anyway, George, you came in here for a reason. So what is it you want to say?
Yeah, you guys are talking gibberish. Of course, the World Trade Center
Jeez.
was fixed, and it fell in on its own we call footprint, because there was already bombs ready to explode. The plane. Why I say this is because how? I mean, how in an explosion so
Uh-huh.
spectacular, in a crash so monumental,
Uh-huh.
how
Uh-huh.
were they able to find evidence of the passports of these
Uh-huh.
villains that
Well,
actually perpetrated the crash?
I
sure. Well,
don't think
George,
near the
if you listen to our gibberish a little bit more closely, you would know that we've already said all of that.
No, but I'm focusing in on just that.
I see.
everything else is just nice, nice, nice talk.
Nice,
It
George.
does
Well,
fill up the
thank
time.
you very much, George. I always
It's
appreciate you
beautiful.
coming in and just bringing down the mood like 1,000%. It is wonderful how you go about doing that. Yeah, it's almost like you're a specialized skilled in it. Are you a CIA operative? Is that well, no? You're NSA, aren't you? I know. I got
No,
it
no, no, no,
now.
no, 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 no. I'm deep state.
Okay. Jesus, George. Hi, welcome to TFT. Anyway, guys, I think that's a perfect cue for us to wrap up today, actually. And to keep in mind that I had a good conversation here today, Model. It was a lot of fun. And with you guys in the chat as well. This obviously is something that affected all of us, particularly of us old enough to have lived through it. It was a surreal, shocking thing to be part of. It was something that you would never expect to have happened in America, and I kind of imagine it's similar to how people felt when Kennedy was shot. Because I'm not old enough to have been part of that. Of course, I lived through the aftermath of it for damn sure. But it is a shocking thing, and of course, we've only touched the surface. There's so much we could get into. I saw you guys talking about the thermite, the firemen's opinions. We didn't even get into the report, and the report itself, which it's one interesting because that when that big report came out, immediately the press stopped talking about it as soon as it came out. Why? Because it was very damning as to what had happened with those
Oh
buildings.
yeah. Well, Popular Science was doing articles on the collapse.
Yeah.
You had all kinds of videos being released.
Hmm.
I think Mythbusters did something on it and then pulled the episode, and they refused to ever talk about it.
Right. So
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, that's right. That's the second episode that they pulled. The first one was Wi-Fi. I would call purchasing
yeah,
RDI transactions.
RFID. Or
That's RFID
people that
transactions.
depending on your age, I don't think people really understand. If you were born in the '90s, you don't really understand how free we actually were and how
yeah,
much of a change. If you were born in like 94, 95, you were still in kindergarten at the end of the '90s, first grade. You were very young when that happened. And your perception of what was actually going around you is you're under so much control by your parents. You don't realize how much of a change occurred in just a matter of a year or two
yeah,
right after 9/11. And then I would say up until about 2010. After 2010, things started to really pick up. Now, in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, stuff is ramped up like you
yeah.
wouldn't believe. So if you haven't been able to kind of sit back and watch all this happen, you don't have that reference that is maybe setting off your instinct, and is where you
Hmm.
feel that something just is not right.
Yeah. No, the
Um,
the Patriot Act was a monstrous thing, dude. And the easiest thing to see from, and of course it's just the tip of the iceberg, but the easiest thing to see with the Patriot Act is just to see how it is for you to go through an airport now,
yeah,
and
you
how
used to be
absolutely
able to,
ridiculous.
your
Yeah,
whole family could go through to the gate and sit with you, and all you did was show your ticket when you got on a plane.
that's right.
All of that changed overnight.
Yep, yep. And of
So,
course,
and there's not been any other incidents. Some people say that underwear bomber, but that's pretty much been proven to be a complete op. Where that
yeah,
guy was a CIA asset, that
yeah.
underwear bomber. Guy was trying to light a bomb, a C4 bomb on fire with a lighter, wasn't he, or a match, or just something ridiculous.
Yeah, you need an electrical
You
charge for that.
can't, yeah, you can't, and
Yeah,
you need a blasting cap. Actually,
yeah,
you can't initiate an explosion with that stuff. And if it's not contained, it's just gonna puff. I mean,
exactly.
it's just ridiculous.
Now, people are still dying from 9/11. Nick C says, well, that's a fair point.
No question. And
Yeah,
I would say that's probably all that asbestos that went into the air and it was in all that dust, and nobody told those people, because they're all dying from respiratory
yeah,
uh,
yeah, they are. Yeah,
diseases. Nobody told those people the danger, and that's another thing, is that people actually died in that thing and
Mhm.
continue to die. Unlike some of these other things that are probably a little bit more of a setup. I mean, yeah, in my opinion, our government murdered its own citizens. And then even now, they won't even cough up a few bucks for these families.
No,
It's
no.
it's
Yeah.
sickening.
It is bad, and of course, yeah, Joe, we lost a lot. I went all Murray Rothbard after 9/11, damn patriot acting, right? Even just getting a bank account after 9/11 was a hassle. Yeah, many things,
Yes,
dude. Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah. But
And
anyway,
well,
guys,
then maybe those cuckoo people. What were they called again? Sovereign citizens.
yeah, yeah.
Aren't they like the Amish, where they are
No, God, no, no.
self-reliant?
No, no, they're not Amish at all. These are just a bunch of kids. This started back in this late 60s, early 70s with the hippie movement. And you just got a lot of kids that someone says, you know what? There's a couple of things in the Constitution that if you do, you don't have to get a speeding ticket. And they believe it. And they,
Yeah,
because they,
I don't recommend doing it. A
no, it's
few
dumb.
people have gotten away with it, but most people haven't.
Well, and one of the problems they go with is the Confederate articles that were before the Constitution came in, and they try to point to that. But what they don't understand is we're no longer living under that. We live under the Constitution. What are you on about, you idiots? It's like the same people that said the first president of the United States wasn't George Washington. What are you talking about? He was the president of the Congress, just like we have a president of the Senate. Please, people. God. But anyway, yeah, sovereign citizens are idiots.
If
But
the court and the governments doesn't want you to get away with something, they're not going to let you.
yeah, yeah, you don't have freedom. But we are definitely at the end here, though, guys. Now, if you're interested in us doing more and diving deeper, which we certainly can, into 9/11, just let us know. And because we really enjoy doing the TFT stuff, you guys seem to enjoy being part of it. So just let us know in the chat or hit me up on Twitter or what have you. But yeah, pretty awesome. Let me let George go ahead and give a closing comment, and then I'll go to Model, and then we'll say goodbye. Go ahead, George.
Yes, let's talk about conspiracy theories. TFT is the place to be, and I'll leave you with one conspiracy theory that will make it go, hmm.
Hmm.
A couple of weeks ago, we were supposed to talk about the Clintons, but no, Chester disappeared. DeWolf disappeared. Dinale disappeared. George disappeared. There was nobody there for that Sunday. It was a miracle of miracles. All four key people. Wait a minute. Model 3 model wasn't even there as well. How is it that so many people who converge on one show were just not available? Kind of makes you go, hmm.
I was winding toilet paper around my neck.
No, that's nice. I was in Hiroshima, George. That's why. But anyway, thank you, George. Model, go ahead, dude.
Um, you know, people, get your critical thinking back. Take it back. Don't let people tell you how things are. Don't watch this stuff and let someone tell you what you're seeing. Because usually, if you got a feeling that you're seeing something different, there, there's a reason why we have instinct and why we have premonition and why we have our senses. And we're marching towards a Judge Dredd type thing where we just live in a box and we just take whatever information they want to pump through on a cable line, and no one says anything. You work, you come home, you eat, and you turn on your television. Don't lie. Even if you're wrong, what is it? You're not going to lose anything by being wrong.
Yeah, have an opinion. Good point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and have your own opinion. We sit here and we talk about all kind of things on this show, but keep in mind that in the end, the only person who can inform you is yourself, right? And just to also keep in mind that if there are any conspiracy theories that you feel that you're particularly knowledgeable about, tell us. Give us a shout out, and we'll set up a show for that, and we'll get you on here to talk about it, guys. Yeah, right, Joe. Brave New World, of course. Yeah, that's exactly where they're taking us, and they don't care that you can see it either. But nevertheless, thank you guys very much for being here. This is a lot of fun as usual. At tomorrow, of course, we have the California show at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll see you guys all then. So Model, namaste
Yeah.
me out of here, dude.
All right. Well, no matter how bad things look, things are at their worst, and it looks like it's never going to get any better. You got to just hold your head up high because it's probably going to get a whole lot worse.
That's beautiful, man.
Namaste. Beautiful.
That's awesome. That
Yeah.
made me cry.
Later, guys.